our last speaker today, I'm a tree hugger. So I'm pleased to introduce our last speaker, Nick McGrath of Trees Forever. This Cedar Rapids area resident survived Iowa's derecho and is helping the community rebuild. He knows why we should be planting trees for tomorrow, but do you know what tree to plant? Okay, you've planted a tree, now what? Nick is here to help. Although he recently joined Trees Forever staff, he has been in the industry for years as a retail nursery manager with the Iowa DNR. He's worked with private landowners, cities, and counties across east central Iowa as they recover from the derecho and look to replant for future generations. A twist in his career journey, he began his career as a public school educator. His passion for education and arboriculture shines through his work teaching Iowans about the importance of trees with creative methods and sound science. Outside of work, he's a high school coach, husband, father, and caregiver to many cultivar redbuds in his yard, and has been duly informed that there are to be no more of those trees. Please welcome Nick.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Too much? Okay. I used to teach middle school. We're going to talk about some things. I'm prepared for your hateful stares. That's fine. I've got some thick skin. I'll tie back into the last one. This is very just, I think, dumb luck, but I've avoided all the deer issues in my garden because I live in a neighborhood where almost no one has fenced-in yards, and they love my neighbor's food more than mine. So my yard is the napping yard. They'll come and they'll lay right up against the raised bed. They don't eat anything. And then they get up from their nap and they go next door and they destroy the whole yard. So put more desirable things in your neighbor's yard and maybe save your own. So my name is Nick McGrath. I am with Trees Forever. I'm the East Central Iowa Field Coordinator. I work roughly from Grinnell over to Clinton and Davenport. If you live in that area and you need some things done, give me a call. Happy to come and talk and do a site visit. We have a big volunteer group to dig holes. Probably not in your yards. I don't know. I like it a lot. I might do that. But yeah, please give us a call. This is roughly where we work. The state of Iowa is divided into 5 sections to try to ease the workload on us. Still enjoy a lot being out and about. Anything from advocacy, we work a lot with city ordinances, different counties and communities. We help with the roadside plan that Christine talked about first. We do a lot of stuff, so give us a call. We love to come out and visit. Ooh. All right, that's fine. We're going to cover a couple of different things today in some sections. We're going to talk about what it means to be a native plant and why that actually matters. I love that Christine hit on some of this already. It's going to save us some time. Forget about the Iowa score. Figure out the next one later. And then we're going to look at some real-time data on tree diversity. How are we actually doing? It's easy to speak about things. We can throw out percentages, but what does that actually mean as far as tree numbers go? And then I'll give you some tips and tricks to do in your own home that I really love and enjoy, and it makes for a cool space. So, first a couple of questions, just because it's fun, I think. So, some trivia. What is the most prevalent tree genus in the Midwest? If you think you know, shout it out. Oak, honey locust, crabapple, maple, or serviceberry? Oak, maple, crabapple. It's kind of a mix. There are a whole bunch of maples. They are everywhere. So here we have Iowa's native maples, box elder. I heard a couple of groans. It's a workhorse tree. It is a native. You may not like it, but it does really well here, and it provides a lot of support for pollinators. Mountain maple is one you probably won't find. Black maple, sugar, silver. Red maple is really only in the northeast corner. Even though it is everywhere, that is its native space. We just love it, so we put it everywhere. And noticeably absent are your hybrid maples. If you have an autumn blaze, that is a hybrid maple, and you won't find it on this list. Same with a Norway. If it is red all year long, it's probably an invasive species. Our trees were not meant to be that color, So if you have your maple tree and it's dark purple, I would love for you to prune it about here. It'd be great. Number 2, according to the state of Iowa, what is the official tree? Very convincing, bur oak. Just the oak. Too many choices. No one could decide. They just said oaks are everywhere. We have a whole bunch of different ones. Let's just call it oak. Number 3, going along that line, what is the only native oak tree to the entirety of the state of Iowa? All 4 corners, central Iowa. Here is our bur oak. Here are some other oaks that are native to our area. There's a lot of them. You probably won't find a bunch of them in nurseries because you just don't, they don't know about them or people don't ask. It's all kind of a product of capitalism, right? They sell what sells, which is why there are probably, I won't make you raise your hands, but there are probably a lot of autumn blaze maples in your yards out here. That's what sells. It's nice, it's consistent. They don't stock these. So we're going to talk about why a little bit later. Kicking this off, we're going to talk about native. And I love that Christine already touched on this. So it is defined, again, we can skip some of this because it's been touched on, but the important piece is that we here define it as pre-European settlement. That's fairly arbitrary. And in Christine's PowerPoint, she said, native plants have been around for thousands of years. Well, why did we make that cutoff, several hundred years ago? What happened? Why is that? So we have that. Again, we're going to come back to this on the continent prior to European settlement. And there is no better example in my mind than this tree. Anyone know what this tree is? This is a pawpaw. Excellent. So this is a really cool tree. I really enjoy this tree. I've got a couple of them. I've never candidly had the fruit. I hope it's good. I've invested a lot in it. It's in my yard. My wife's going to be a little unhappy if it's gross. But I think it's going to be great, even if, I'll just eat it with a smile on my face. It'll be good. So this is the pawpaw. And I really like the story of the pawpaw because it is super old. It originated, subtropics. I think this works. Awesome. And then 3 million years ago, the Isthmus of Panama popped up from the ocean, and all of a sudden we have a land pathway. Everything's going north and south. It has means to go places that it couldn't before, and so it starts to migrate. And it goes up and up and up, and it keeps going north, and it keeps going north. Animals took it as far as they could, and then people came. So what this did is, we have actual evidence of this, which I think is fascinating, that the indigenous tribes really valued specifically this strain of pawpaw, what we would call the common pawpaw that we have here, as a commodity. They made rope out of the branches. They really used it as currency. They did a whole bunch of stuff with the pawpaw. And so they took it from what would be the native range of the other 7 species, which is very, very southern United States, Texas, Florida. They took this one that they loved, and they essentially bred it to be more cold hardy and more cold hardy over a period of thousands of years. So this all happened, and then European settlement happened. The pawpaw was here. It is now native. So native is really where you draw that line. I think it's really important to know. I think personally it's something that you have to decide and be comfortable with yourself. But it is just a number. A couple other examples that I find really fascinating. In England, they define native as what is existing since the last glacier. So 10,000 years. If it has been here, we'll call it native. In China, I didn't find any hard and fast rule on native, but there are documents back in 659 AD about invasive species. That's a lot further than our 1492 cutoff date. So really consider how we got to this native definition. What I care about most is supporting our local flora and fauna. We really need to support our insect colonies. We need to support our bees. And we need to do that through a wide variety of plants. So again, here's our takeaway. Native really is just a construct that we have decided upon. It could be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. I don't want anyone to be so hung up on native that we will only plant a certain thing. Ash was native, and we loved it. And we still love it, but it's gone. And we don't want to replicate this over and over and over again. So we need a diverse mix of species in order to support what we have here. Okay. Great, yay, wonderful. All this stuff, maybe, sure, kind of. I'm a little uncomfortable. Where do we go? So here we're going to go back to touching on maples. With the Iowa DNR, they decided that, or through studies and inventories, 37% of public trees are maple. That is a tremendous percentage of trees, and that's only public trees. That's your streets, your parks, right-of-ways, maybe roadside ditches, public buildings and public grounds. It doesn't account for the yards. And if you've seen recent development sites and construction sites and homes, you get a house, you get 2 trees. You have a house, you get 2 trees. And the builders want something that is reliable and consistent. We're going to have more maples. We're probably going to have more hybrid maples. So we want to expand that. We want to work with those people to say, what can we do that is different? Give me something different. Because if 37% are the public trees, I imagine that number is probably closer to 60 when you account for all of the yards, front yard, backyard, side yard, maples. Here's what that looks like. Again, easy to put into numbers, kind of hard to see. This is just a Google Street View of a relatively new residential, I'm going to call it a complex, in Ankeny. Everything is a maple. And this goes on for probably 50 blocks. The street is just lined with maples. The boulevard is maples. The yard is maples. This is a problem. Now, it sounds like I hate maples. I don't. I kind of consider maples to be like the Starbucks of the tree world. I got a couple hateful glares, that's okay. So I say that because it's still a good tree, right? It's doing all the things that a tree needs to do. It's providing shade, it's providing eco benefits, it's probably cutting down on your energy bills. It's pretty, it drops its leaves, everything that a tree should do. It's not inherently bad, and it's very consistent. And I call it a Starbucks because, number one, it's consistent, right? If you plant it, it really doesn't care about the soil. It doesn't much care about the water. It will just grow. And it's nice, it's very convenient, and it's everywhere. If you drive into a town, there's a Starbucks. If you drive into a big town, there's 2 Starbucks, or 10, or 20. And if you drive a couple of blocks or take some steps, you will fall into a Starbucks. And this is the same thing with maples, right? It's not bad, they're just everywhere. And this is only a problem when the next thing comes along that loves maples. And we're in the situation again that we did with the elm trees, and then again with the ash trees. We just don't want to do that. And so to avoid any of that potential issue, we really have to look at diversity. And so this is kind of what it looks like as far as numbers. And I get to toot the horn of Trees Forever a little bit, which I think is very cool. Noticeably absent from this list is maples. We've only mapped trees, candidly, for the last 2 years, so this doesn't account for anything prior to that, but this is everything we've planted in 2021 and 2022. We've been really discouraging towns from planting maples. Again, not that they're bad, just that they're everywhere. And so I think we've done a pretty good job. There could be things added to this list or increased on this list for sure. But I think it's pretty good. We're doing a good job. And again, percentages are easy, but let's shift this over to numbers. We've got a lot of London plane tree. We have a lot of crabapple. We're going to look in just a few moments at the native crabapple. One thing I'd like to change, it says we've planted 279 crabapples, and I make a pretty good bet that none of them are our native crabapple species. I would love to incorporate that more. So certainly some work yet to be done, but I think it's pretty good. Now, on the bottom end of things, here's where I really want to work, and this is part of the reason why I'm out doing what I'm doing, and I love coming into towns, seeing what's already there, and pitching new ideas. How can you get something else in your space? Because I think a black maple is a great tree. Again, I just told you not to do maples, but black maple is sorely underplanted. This is a maple that's going to turn yellow in the fall. Most of our native trees turn yellow, and most of us don't want that. So we go to the pretty stuff. I think black willow is great. Hickories, we desperately need hickories. If you have space that is full sun, please plant it. It will take a very long time to mature. Be okay with that. So just to check out a couple of different things. Again, this is all part of the consumerism cycle, right? The nursery's going to stock what sells. I was that person for a few years, and I had to make ends meet at the end of the month, at the end of the year, so we sold what sells. We didn't sell a lot of black oak. We should. It's a cool tree. It turns yellow in the fall, so a lot of people didn't want it. But it grows really well here. It's a native oak tree. We just need more. Here's our prairie crabapple. It's a really pretty tree. Probably not going to find it because it's not like the other crabapples, right? We want the Adirondack crab that just does this, and it's always going to be this big, and it's 4 foot wide. It's really convenient in the right spot, but we need this. These are really cool things. It would be much the same if you were planting heirloom vegetables, right? Consider these to be kind of like heirloom trees. The caveat is that you only have a limited number of sites for your trees, right? As my wife has duly pointed out. She says enough. We'll see. But I think these are great. A couple others that I really enjoy. This is our black maple. Grows really well here. It's great for syrup production if you're into that and you're looking into that industry. It is shade tolerant, which is pretty cool. It has big droopy leaves that I think are fun. They're really fuzzy on the bottom. It's just a neat tree. And this is another one, another oak that's native to Iowa. This is a dwarf chinkapin oak. If you think I can't have an oak tree because I don't have space, yes you do. Plant these. They're really cool. They're in between a shrub and a tree, depending on your soil. They really love terrible, awful, gravelly, rocky soil devoid of everything. Can you think of a spot that is all of those things? Most construction sites, roadsides. This would be a great tree underneath a utility line. We don't need 279 crab apples. We can throw in hornbeam. We can use a dwarf chinkapin oak. We can have oak trees underneath the power line. It's pretty cool. They only take 5 or 6 years to start producing acorns. Put one in your neighbor's yard so the deer stay out. Send them that way. Because it's very accessible for the deer to eat the acorns, right? It's no longer just a squirrel food until the squirrels drop it down or throw it at someone. This is something that the deer would love to munch on, some acorns. So line it, line a yard with it. Maybe they stay out of your garden too. But it's pretty cool. It's also salt tolerant. I mean, it really doesn't get much better for a roadside tree, in my opinion. So, great, we did all of this. Now what? I am remiss if I don't talk about right tree, right place, because this really makes all the difference. Much like I want to put that dwarf chinkapin oak next to a road because it's going to get hit with salt, and the soil there is probably garbage. If there's any soil at all, it might just be a gravel pit. It's very possible. So we need to plant trees in the right spaces for the right reasons, give them the right care, and that really will enable them to live out their entirety of their life. This is a very cool catalpa tree that is over in Woodward. It's super old, it's fallen apart. It's probably 120 foot tall and about 80 foot wide. Really neat tree. Clearly someone knew that it needed a bunch of space to grow. They were able to leave those low-hanging limbs so that it just looks like a neat tree, and it was able to live out its life. This is not that. try not to do this. Again, I came from nursery world, and it's really important to read tags and labels, as I'm sure you know. Candidly, when I started gardening, I tried to do the companion planting, and I thought, this zinnia will work great. No, it's the wrong tag. It's now 4 foot tall. It's overtaking my garden. This is bad. Well, the same thing happens in the tree world. This is not a tree you want next to your house. Please choose wisely. Think about the mature size of your tree, what it needs to grow and exist, and not compete with anything else that's there that you care about. Here's a shout out to the Morton Arboretum. This is their 101st year of existence, and they have a really neat demonstration with pin oaks. If you know anything about pin oaks, they are notorious for developing chlorosis. They don't like high pH soils. And so this is a pin oak in some really nice acidic soil, not compacted. Great. This is going to be a good tree. And right next to it, as the demonstration, this is the opposite. This is typically what you would get in eastern Iowa because we have a lot of limestone. Your pin oak may look like this most of the year. So making sure that you know what your soil is like, that you have a tree that can sustain its life in that soil. The tree can't get up and move. And putting on different iron fertilizers every single year, you could. That's really expensive. So choosing the right tree for the space is awesome. This kind of touches back on tilling up your garden, right? We don't want to compact the soil around your tree. So try really hard, especially if there's construction, and footpaths, all of that can really damage those roots. So try to block that off as much as you can. Again, this is what we don't want. There's no reason for this, especially if you're doing construction and you could just wait. I had a really unfortunate project several years ago. We planted a city park. We got all the trees in the ground, and the city manager came out and said, hey, did you know we were going to pave this park next year to put in a new bridge? No. Awesome. So know what's going to happen to the space. Know that that tree that you put in is going to make it. There's nothing worse than investing, frankly, not only the day's worth of labor, but however long you have to maintain this tree that should live to be 100, 150, 500, 1,000 years old, to pull it out 1 year later because of an infrastructure project. A lot of times we see this at the home level with building a new deck or doing some new concrete work. All of those tools and equipment running over your dirt really does impact your trees that are a long way away. They did some cool research on root lengths, and they found that it's approximately 38 times the diameter of your tree. So if I have a tree that's 2 foot around, it probably has roots to the wall. If infrastructure will allow it to go that far. So really be cognizant of what's happening around your tree, in addition to picking the right tree for the space. And then lastly, make sure we're taking care of it the right way. Pruning cuts are necessary. They can be great, they can be terrible. Kind of the guru of pruning said, pruning is the best thing we can do for a tree, pruning is the worst thing we can do for a tree. Because they just want to exist, and we've decided that they need to look a certain way. So it does happen. But make sure you know proper pruning cuts. I would love to come out and give a pruning workshop. Feel free to give me a call. I like doing that stuff. So just taking care of the things that you have in the space that you have is going to be phenomenal. So a couple of tips and tricks for you as a homeowner, or if you're working with a neighborhood association, what can you do to kind of bring some of this back to your local level? Number one, I'm going to tell you to be really diligent and committed to what you want. Don't give up just because you can't find it. Don't give up because it is hard. I was talking to someone at the break. Choosing a tree is hard. There are a lot of trees. How do you know what's going to do well? Hopefully some of this will help. So we have zones. Hopefully you're familiar. If not, this is the USDA map. It says zone 5. I kind of err on the colder end. I tend to pick zone 4 hardy plants because we do get those blasts of -40 from time to time, and I want to make sure that my stuff can sustain and thrive through those changes in climate. So we've got the zones, but then we have all this stuff that is no longer a natural space, right? Our neighborhoods haven't been natural since it became a neighborhood. So what this does is it creates really unique little niches and spaces for you to play with and do some cool things with your yard. And I'm going to call those your microclimates. As just an example, this is a clip art version of a city lot. You've got your garage, you've got your house, and let's assume south is down, north is up. So on the north side, we've got a patch that is just hot. It's super dry, nothing drains back there. It's out in the full sun all day long. I need to pick things that are going to be able to thrive in that space. I've got some shade that's created by the garage. I've got shade that's created by the house. I have a drainage pool because maybe your gutters all run to there, or you have a drainage tile, or your neighbor was very kind and they're sending all their water to that spot. You got to know that, and you got to pick trees that will do well. So you have all these little things that you can now play with. You don't just have to know, hey, I have a yard, I need a tree. And so this translates for me into different zones. In my back spot where it's just hot and sun and terrible and the dirt's really hard, I need a zone 4 tolerant plant because it's also going to take the brunt of the winter. It's got that full exposure. It also needs to tolerate a lot of heat, maybe some drought. But right next to it, I have a shady spot. It's probably going to maintain moisture a little bit easier than the hot, dry patch because there's going to be shade 7 hours out of the day. Same goes with the shade from the house. And I've got this nice little patch in front where it's wet. It's, so you have consistent moisture, and it's shaded from the north and west by the house. So I can plant some kind of finicky plants there that I think, hey, maybe this will do really well. Let's see what happens. And you can play around with these. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with this. We saw the landscape or the prairie plots earlier where it's all just an aerial view. Right? So we see it like this, and we think, oh, I don't have enough space. But we can also go this way, which is a really neat attribute of trees. So if you look at these photos, again, these are just homes for sale in Iowa. Every yard has one tree. You have a yard, you get a tree. You have a yard, you get or you have your house, you get a tree, right? House, you get a tree. And they all have one tree. And I think, why do you only have one tree? It may take up space this way, but what can we do this way? So I was really lucky to work on this house after derecho. The swamp white oak survived, and they said, hey, we really would love some more stuff here. So a lot of people, this homeowner included, right, those branches have been pruned over many, many, many years, and now you've got 20, 25, 30 foot of clearance to play with. There's no reason that tree has to be the only tree in the yard. So they let me play around with it, which I really loved. So here, if I can get it, just in front of the oak here, there's a black gum, really pretty tree. I think the fall color rivals that of a maple, quite honestly, and it's going to fill in this gap where derecho has knocked out a good chunk of their oak tree. So we've got 40 foot of clearance there. Great, let's fill it. In the back, we've got a pawpaw. It loves the shade. It's only going to be 15 foot tall. Why not? In the back and the front here, there's another pawpaw because you need two to pollinate. We've got a redbud out front. Here in the right-of-way is a blackjack oak and a hornbeam. So they really wanted to fill their space. This is a little tiny lot. It's, I don't know, 0.2 acres. They have 12 trees, which seems like a lot, but you still have space. Right? I'm not advocating that everyone grow a forest in their yard. That would be fabulous. If you have a whole bunch of neighbors that wanted to grow your own little timber stand, that would be really cool. But for most people, that is way too much, my wife included. She has told me no. I've tried. But you can really use the space. A lot of us think this way, but we also need to think about this way. So I want you to go out and find the tree that works for you. It gets pretty personal here, and that's totally fine. If you want a tree that's not messy, I get it. If If you want a tree that is red in the fall, you can get it. That's fine. So I'm going to argue a couple of things. Plant native trees where you can, because we need them. There are a lot of species that are underrepresented, threatened, endangered. We need those. We need to save those genetics. We need to plant those trees and let them live out their life and produce seeds and hopefully get more of that same tree. I'm going to also argue that you can plant non-native trees if a native tree won't do. If you have a linden, a traditional American linden, you probably know that it is destroyed in January or June and July from Japanese beetles. That's what we used to say in the nursery. You could spot a linden in June because it has no leaves. But there is a European strain, the silver linden, that is resistant to Japanese beetles, or fairly resistant, right? Enough that I suggest planting it. So if you enjoy a linden and you like it to have leaves all year long, I think that is fine. What I don't want you to go out and do is plant an invasive species. Many of these you can find at your garden centers. Iowa does not have laws against selling them at the moment. Japanese barberry, Callery pear, Norway maple, you can go out and buy these at any of our garden centers, nurseries. Please don't plant them. So plant natives. If you can't, non-natives are fine as long as they're not invasive or overly aggressive. And avoid planting invasives. There are a lot of cool tools to go out and do this. There are certainly books, published lists. Trees Forever has a list, Iowa DNR. A lot of places you can find opinions on what's good. One that I put a screenshot here on the slide is iTree Species. This is a really neat tool. You can actually go in, type in your zip code, tell them your soil type, shade preferences, and it'll generate a list of everything that could live in that space. It's not everything you're going to want. Someone earlier grown to box elder, it will be on this list right here. Again, great native tree. So it's going to generate everything, right? All of those possibilities. And then really sort through those and narrow it down and say, what out of this do I actually like? What could I get? What would grow well? What suits my level of care? If you have a red maple or a hybrid maple, you should spend a decent amount of time trimming that tree and doing some structural pruning because it's prone to codominant leaders. It'll get the crown torn out in a windstorm. So really think about your investment in that tree. And then go to arboretums, just look at them. If you think, hey, I would like a hackberry in my yard, and you go to an arboretum and you see a 70-foot tall hackberry, you go, oh, no, too big. Then I'm really glad you went, because you would have had that tree in your yard, and at some point you would have hated it and possibly taken it down because you say, hey, this is way too big. Similar tagging issue, when I was in the garden center, they tagged, or they had a non-redwood, so a metasequoia, giant 80, 100-foot tall tree in the ornamental tree section. And there was a very nice old lady who said, hey, I'm going to take this home and I'm going to plant it in front of my window as a nice little tree to look at. No, 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 no. Please do not. So read your tags, make sure you know what you're putting in the space that it's going and that it's going to be okay there. Lots of resources to go out and figure out what is that tree. This can all take some time. Please be patient. Know that if you're adamant about getting the thing that you want, you will. Sometimes it's as easy as just initiating a conversation with your nursery contact, someone who owns or manages a garden center, to say, hey, I'd really like this tree. Can you find it for me? Those people are pretty well connected, and chances are they'd be willing to help. Another thing to consider is, they're going to sell what sells, right? And so there's some inherent risk in picking something new. Hey, I want a blackjack oak. Okay, well, I don't know if a blackjack oak is going to sell. But if you say, hey, I have a group of people, I have 6 people interested in a blackjack oak. Can you get 6? Well, sweet. Let's get 6 of them sold. So if you can kind of guarantee that sale, it's going to prompt them to be a little bit more explorative in what they offer. And The kind of the silver lining in this, or the secondary benefit, is that if you ask, they're going to think, oh, maybe there's a need. And if enough people start to ask for different things, they're going to start to move that direction anyway. We have a relief program happening in Cedar Rapids, and a really nice perk of that program is that we've actually seen a decline of maple sales across the board in garden centers in the Cedar Rapids area because we're not promoting them. People aren't going to the garden centers and asking for red maples, so they're selling less of them. I think that's pretty cool. So this could happen anywhere. You have some fabulous garden centers and nurseries in the Iowa City area in Johnson County. Those people really know their stuff. So if you go and talk to them, chances are they can find your tree. Step 2, if you can't find it there is a great native nursery in Des Moines or just outside of Des Moines, Iowa Native Tree and Shrub. I believe they also make house calls, which is really nice. They have a huge list of native tree and shrub species. If it's native, they're going to offer it, more than likely. So if you can't find it in the garden center and they can't get it, step 2 is to go there. Step 3 is to go to the DNR nursery or somewhere that does seedlings, because that's much less risk inherent. If you're only growing a tree to be 12 inches tall, and then if nobody buys it, it just goes to the compost, becomes the next tree. So you could look at seedlings if you're willing to be patient. That's a great way to go. They grow really well once they're established. And then if all else fails, you can go out seed hunting. It's a little daunting, but it's kind of fun if you're out with someone who really knows what they're after. I've been on the hunt for a rock elm for about 2.5 years, and I cannot find it. We've exhausted 1,500 nurseries from around the country. No one grows it. I don't know. So really want one. I'm going to go out with a USDA horticulturist in April, and I'm going to go get my own seed and try to grow it myself. If you're really into that, I say go for it. I was part of a really cool tree walk by Jim Miller here in Iowa City, probably 5 or 6 months ago. And that's kind of his gig. He goes around and collects seed from the neighborhood from really good trees that are performing well, and he'll grow them out in his backyard. I think that's a really cost-effective way to get some cool trees, save some genetics of really nice trees, and get them out in the community. And then lastly, just be an advocate. Share your cool trees. Get some cool trees, let your neighbors see them. Feel free to talk about them. Up in the top left corner, this is a fruiting plumcot tree that's in Cedar Rapids. It's really neat. I've never seen one of them before that actually produces fruit. Not a native, candidly, but just a neat tree, right? I'm all for cool trees. Down on the bottom left, this is a shagbark hickory. We just need them. They're a hugely important species. They're a keystone species for Iowa. They support an enormous amount of pollinator potential and habitat. They do take a while to grow, so a lot of people don't plant them. In the middle, we have a beech tree. These aren't seen very often either. They are enormous. You need a lot of space for a beech tree. You can probably find some European cultivars in the nursery centers. They're going to have purple leaves. There's a tricolor beech tree. It's kind of fun. But we really need this. These are really neat trees. Down in the bottom corner is the prairie crabapple once more. It's also called the Iowa crabapple. It is that specialized to our climate. It does really well. And then the top is a blackjack oak. Fun little tree. You wouldn't know, well, it's kind of a hard time knowing it's an oak tree from the leaf, but the leaf is about 1 foot long. Looks like a big T-Rex paw. Just a really cool tree. So go out and celebrate the stuff that you have. Make sure other people know about it and try to encourage others to take the same path. Don't have the same tree as your neighbor, essentially. So. Thank you.
You mentioned a black gum. Can you talk about that tree a little bit? I've heard that it's a native tree.
Yes.
I've been looking at pictures. Just describe some of its characteristics for me, please.
Sure. Waxy leaves. They're going to be kind of thin, lobed. It's got a really brilliant orange-red fiery color in the fall. The leaves are waxy, so the light shines off of them. Dark green foliage in the year. It's very pyramidal. If you want a tree with a nice shape and structure, that'll do that. It'll tolerate part shade, which is cool for a tree that produces a lot of color. Most of the time you have to get that in full sun. It's got really nice gray, smooth bark to it. They are a little more difficult to transplant when they're larger, so you're probably better off finding a smaller version. Yeah, if you get them about yay big, they should be okay. And they love to be fairly wet, so don't be afraid to put them in kind of a moist site.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I have, for many years, grown different kinds of trees, and I grow them not because I have a space for them, but I have a couple friends that will plant them out on their acreages. And I found some acorns again this year. They're fairly small, and they're striped, but they are from oak trees next to the pool at Coralville, and they're really interesting acorns. I've never seen anything like them before. How can you figure out what kind of tree those are? Because they're huge. Whoever planted them, they probably don't know now what they have there.
If you know him, call Mark Vitash. Yes, he will know.
Okay,
He
if
will
I
know,
don't
and
know
he
him.
would love to come out.
Okay.
I'll get you in touch with him.
Okay. And my other question was, are Osage oranges considered native? A couple, 3 years ago, we had a garden tour here in Iowa City, and there were people that had Osage oranges on the southeast end of town, I believe. I never knew what they looked like as big, mature trees, but they are beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
I think so too. And this is kind of that caveat to native and where you decide to draw the line, because they're starting to find that the climate for Osage orange is becoming more tolerable here. And so they're able to grow. Whereas previously we just couldn't grow them. So things are getting warmer, everything is starting to shift. I think it's probably native to the very maybe southern counties. But I do think it's starting to creep north. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. One question I have for you. I was really intrigued by that house where you had planted all of those new trees underneath. And I don't know, I'm a big breeder of Doug Tallamy, so I've been follow a lot of his stuff. So I've been trying to plant my trees more in groves. So like, here's the great big trees and then the smaller trees, and then trying to do understory bushes.
Yes.
Like dogwoods and buttonbush and those. Would you plant all those layers at the same time? Because I buy a lot of my stuff from like the state forestry, so I start out with small stuff.
Sure.
Or should you let like the bigger ones get fairly big? Because then I'm afraid they're going to shade out the others. So I've sort of been planting everything at the same time. So I'm just wondering if that's an okay approach, or if you had any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think a lot of it comes down to the amount of work and effort and finances you want to commit at any given point in time. I have very large plans for my yard, and my wife says no. Slow down. So I'm going to take those in chunks because I need to, so she says. But if you do plant things at once, I think that's fine. We certainly like trees of different ages, but I also think that trees have different lifespans on their own. An oak is going to could be 600, 700, 800 years old, whereas a redbud is going to probably live to be 50. So they're going to hit their midlife crises at different points in time anyway. And if it's more beneficial to get them all started now, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you again. Sounded like you had some difficulty with communication with the municipalities. Is there anything that you'd like to talk to us about that we could help with, or expand on that a little bit more, working with cities.
Ooh. I would love to come talk, yes. So what we're really trying to do is encourage more planting and just more diverse planting. There are a lot of communities that either don't have a parks board or don't have a park staff, and so they're just not planting, and we want to do what we can to help further that along and work on city ordinances to make sure tree lists are promoting diversity. Something that I really like about most of the community tree ordinances that I see is that the list of approved trees is not exclusive. They're not saying, it may have 30 trees, but they're not saying plant these 30. They're saying, hey, these grow really well here. If you want something else, you have to fill out the permit anyway, so put it on there and we'll come talk to you. So that's kind of the work that we do with the cities. We do some work with preservation too. There are some, hopefully some pretty aggressive ordinances coming out of communities in the next couple of years as far as tree preservation goes, which I think is pretty cool. So we'd love to talk more. Yeah.
How would you suggest that we work with landscaping companies about invasive species? A couple of years ago in my subdivision, they were planting something that our parks area had considered invasive. Do you have recommendations?
Without anything hard and fast that we can rely on and enforce, just a conversation. Yeah. If you have an HOA, maybe they can put it in their bylaws. That's possible. I've seen that a couple of places. Otherwise, rely on your cities. Yeah.
Are there other questions for Nick? If not, let's thank him again, please.